Hey, good morning, and thank you for joining us. It's great to have Caroline Virgo here, who is the director of the Clua Initiative, Bev, who is one of our local PCSOs, and Andy, who is the Assistant Diocesan Safeguarding Officer. We're here to talk a little bit about the work of Clua and the issues of modern slavery. So Clua was set up in 2016, initially as a 3-year project, but now the funding has been extended. Caroline, would you be able to tell us a bit about that journey?
Yes, I would be pleased to. So we did initially set up as a 3-year project, and what we discovered during that 3 years was that the Church of England that we are set up to serve was really anxious to engage with issues of modern slavery, and we also realised that it wasn't a problem that was going to be solved in a 3-year period. And because we were able to evidence the value of our work, and particularly the value of our community engagement work with dioceses, the funding was extended by the trustees of the Clua Sisters, and we're now on a rolling 3-year programme. I mean, the advantage of this is it's given us a chance to do some really interesting long-term work, and also to measure its effectiveness. And we're really pleased to be working with you on this webinar.
Great, thank you. So I imagine that one of the things is that people automatically think it won't happen in my community, but we just wondered what has been your experience here, Bev. Do you see this as an issue that's live in Cornwall?
Yes, we do. A lot of people think that Cornwall is a sleepy county, that nothing really happens, and to a certain extent, it isn't sort of in your face, sort of screaming as a big city or something would be. But we definitely have the issues down here. We've got a lot of transient sort of people that work in farming, as well as fishing, and other food processing, but also even just the car washes, and those sort of things as well. So it's a battle for everybody, and I always recommend that if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right, and it's best to report it.
For those involved with Anglican churches in Cornwall, Clua works closely with the safeguarding team. Andy, would you be able to tell us a bit about the support and advice that's available there?
Yes, so Clua have provided a huge range of really accessible training that tends to, if you like, allow us to recognize what might constitute modern slavery. And some of it, as Bev says, is quite subtle and almost feels part of the fabric of communities. Um, we then can link in, if you like, with our 4Rs. The Clua give us how to recognize modern slavery. We clearly start with a pastoral response, and then we look to use our normal safeguarding processes to refer to the safeguarding team. Let us make those difficult decisions that are often complicated by emotions. What will happen to me? What will happen to the individual type questions? Record what you've seen, heard, and what you've done, and then the team can liaise with the experts, whether that's CLUA or other statutory agencies, because the piece of the jigsaw we're providing might be the piece that's been missing for ages.
Thank you, that's really helpful. So what would you say to any of you really are the common misconceptions about identifying modern slavery?
Will I start with that one? So I think that from our work with churches across the UK, there's a number of common themes that seem to emerge. I think just to list them, the first thing is that actually modern slavery happens in this country. It's not just something that takes place overseas, and it's not something that's ended with the ending of the transatlantic slave trade. So that's the first one. I think the second one is that every community is likely to have some sort of modern slavery or exploitation within it. I mean, that's a very difficult thing to get our heads around. We also know that it happens to people who are of UK nationality. And so from the victims that were referred to the Safe House system, which is called the National Referral Mechanism in 2021, about a quarter of those people were actually UK citizens. And this is particularly true when we're talking about the phenomena we call county lines, which involves young people. But having said that, victims are men and women of all ages, all ethnicities, all nationalities, and so it can be anybody. And I think the last thing is that the issue that Andy referred to is that it's not always obvious what the signs are. And sometimes we just need to refer a suspicion to somebody who's a bit more expert than ourselves so that they can look into the situation and make a decision.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any common misconceptions that Caroline hasn't covered there, or do you think that they have all been covered?
No, I think Caroline outlines it beautifully, but I think where the church comes in, we're used to receiving vulnerable people who present in all sorts of ways. And I guess the added question that we're trying to form in people's minds is modern slavery a contributor to this person's vulnerability?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So when you see when you have issues of modern slavery come up, what would you say is the reason for people not wanting to take action? Do you think there's a fear of intervening when people suspect modern slavery, or perhaps a naivety or reticence around what's actually happening? Are there issues there that sort of stop, don't help kind of promote the issue and let people know what's going on?
I think I will answer that one. I think the victims that I've come across, there's to some extent there's some shame, that they can't believe that they've been sort of caught this way. There are quite a lot of similarities with domestic abuse where they don't recognize themselves as victims, and they won't usually come to the police to say I'm a victim of modern slavery. What they'll say is, I need help. And it's a very difficult thing for them to recognize. I think with the people that I've had involvement with, the victims, the shame, and the potentially that they might be going back to their home countries with no money, when they've been entrusted with to come to earn money to provide for the families, and it's getting over that shame, that there is help out there, and there is no shame. It's just unfortunate. So it's about getting the right engagement in the right place at the right time, and showing that we can support people.
I guess so, bearing in mind that people are not likely to come forward and say I'm a victim because of the shame and the fear that you've identified. I guess that makes it even more important for people in the community to notice these things and to report them. So are there barriers to those people reporting them, or to us reporting them, if you like?
I think the obvious one, Rebecca, is that none of us like to think we're judgmental. So we almost have an inbuilt, is it right that I raise this concern? I might have got it wrong. And what we're trying to get is active bystanders, people that are curious, that notice, that ask questions in a supportive way. Just because nobody else has raised it doesn't mean your instinct is wrong. It's probably that everybody else is thinking, well, nobody's raised it, so I'm not going to be the one that raises the awkward question.
Thank you. Yeah, and Caroline, would you say anything to people that perhaps might be in fear of raising a concern?
Well, yes, I mean, people quite often seem to be frightened or worried about it, and I suppose what I would want to tell them is that if they choose to report to the Modern Slavery Helpline or to Crime Stoppers, it will be completely anonymous, and if it's a concern that's about something that's happened on church property or in connection with some church outreach. Then if they report through the diocesan safeguarding structure, Andy and his colleagues will deal with it in a way that doesn't identify the person who's made the initial report. I think that's correct, isn't it, Andy?
Absolutely. The sensitivities around witness identification are well known, and what we're well versed in dealing with statutory agencies and third-party sector agencies, and we'll endeavour to keep that information confidential on a very much need-to-know basis only.
I was really struck by a safeguarding training at a school recently where they said that you'll never know the number of children you've saved by doing your job properly. And I guess that's a really important thing to take away from this as well, that actually it's not about doing your job, but being a member of the community and being able to see people and for that to be visible. And you'll never know the number of people that actually have been impacted by you making the decision to take action.
Absolutely.
So we have Modern Slavery Awareness Day, perhaps something we didn't think we'd have a while ago, but as you've highlighted, it is still a real issue across the country, but also specifically in Cornwall. What sorts of things would you urge people to do to raise awareness of this, and other places where people could find out more information if they wanted to know a bit more, or to share it within their churches?
Is it okay if I answer this question? Yes. So just to give a bit of the background to Anti-Slavery Day, this is something that's marked by all the key national charities, and we obviously feel it's a day that we can particularly draw attention to this issue to the Church of England. We have sort of a campaign that we run at that time. So I've got a whole list of things which, if it's okay, I could just talk about a bit. So I think the first thing is, as we've already discussed on this webinar, is knowing how to recognise the signs of modern slavery. So that might mean attending a training, maybe, I don't know what Bev's availability is, but maybe inviting your community support officer to come in and talk to a church group. So those sorts of things, so that you know what's happening in your area and what sort of things you ought to be able to look out for. And as Clue, we've got a lot of resources that can either provide training or posters that you can put up, things that we can use to help you with that. I mean, some of these seem really basic. I mean, the other thing is to know what to do. I mean, we've just discussed that. So it's, it can be escalated through the Diocesan Safeguarding Department, but then there's also the option of reporting to Crime Stoppers or the local police or the Modern Slavery Helpline. And we really mustn't be shy about reporting our concerns. We need to feel able to do that. But I think perhaps one of the things that I personally feel is most important is that, as has already been mentioned, the church tends to be a place where we want to help vulnerable people and to work with them to resolve their vulnerability. So, for example, we have a lot of homeless projects, food banks. I mean, there's debt agencies, all sorts of outreach projects, and so I think our feeling is, as Clua, and the evidence seems to support the fact that this is where a lot of people who potentially might be in modern slavery or exploitation might be found. And I think, maybe it's quite useful to think, that there can be a sort of, it can sometimes not reach the threshold of modern slavery, but could still be exploitation. And maybe that's something Andy would like to pick up in a minute. But we need to know what the signs are, what we're looking for in our food banks, what we're looking for in our homeless projects, and then we need to have regular training for volunteers. We need to have our reporting pathways clear and our recording pathways clear, so that we know how we can escalate any concerns. And I think those would be the things that I would really want to highlight as actions this Anti-Slavery Day.
Yeah, I suppose, as Andy said earlier, about that kind of, sometimes it's that missing piece in the jigsaw, and actually if we have the connection to those different agencies, then there's the opportunity for us to put that piece in. So Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
I think don't underestimate the power of simplicity. Sometimes having a poster that says this church works alongside CLUA or understands modern slavery is offering something to an individual that might just be the key that unlocks their reticence to speak out. It's a bit like the safeguarding, promoting a safer church communicates to those who've been victims and survivors. This is a church that takes its responsibilities seriously. And you will always go to somewhere where you think you're going to get a good reception rather than an unknown. So sometimes the power of something simple. This church works alongside, supports, understands modern slavery. If anything's worrying you, please speak. Those sort of connections can be the key that unlocks somebody's freedom.
Thank you. And Bev, if somebody perhaps feels that somebody's in imminent danger or something, what would be your suggestion there? Because I guess people are still nervous about when it's right to call 999 and things like that. Have you got any guidance on that for us?
I mean, I think if someone's ultimately at immediate risk of harm, then obviously we would advise 999 without doubt. If it's a bit sort of not immediate, but you've got concerns, you can always contact the force or myself on the 101. There's web chats and those sort of things as well. But what I always say is it's better to report and discuss and go with your gut instinct than do nothing and stand back.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for your time today. I really appreciate you giving up some of your time to talk us through this, because I think it will help to highlight to people in churches and to people in the communities that there is still a real need here, and that we do need to be active citizens and aware of what's going on around us. So thank you for also providing that reassurance that it's safe for people to report things as well, because I think that's really important. Thank you very much.